Blessings, everyone. Thank you for joining me. And I'm really happy today to have as my guest to get to speak with is Buck Johnson. And he has a really interesting podcast on YouTube. So I'll post his YouTube channel in the description of this video, and I'll let Buck introduce himself. Thank you for joining me, Buck.
Thanks for inviting me, Joseph. This is exciting. And I guess for an intro that I could give myself, Buck Johnson, I live in Lockhart, Texas, which
Wow.
for those that aren't too sure, it's about 30 minutes southeast of Austin, Texas, which is where I lived for about 24 years and finally had to get out of there. And so I moved to a small town nearby. It's also the barbecue capital of Texas, Lockhart is. So it's a small town. I had a failed city council run even here, but it was also it was a good learning experience. And miraculously, thank God, I discovered a small little ROCOR Orthodox church in Lockhart, Texas, which led me to the church. Crazy, crazy. It's like it was God's providence that I moved to this small town to begin with, I assume.
Okay. Now, now I noticed on your is it your I think it's your Twitter bio. You have Orthodox catechumen. So have you
Mhm.
been received into the church?
Not quite yet. Um,
Okay.
I was actually going to back in January, and then my life was in some upheaval, as seems to be the case in Orthodoxy sometimes as you enter it. And then I was going to on Lazarus Saturday coming up, and as Father Turbo, who I know has been on your show,
Yeah, I love him.
became my spiritual father. He said, "Could you, if we do it just a few weeks or a month after when you were going to do it on Saturday, I can come down there." He said, "I can't come that Saturday because we're doing the same thing, baptisms in my church." So we're looking at probably sometime in May or June, and he will get to be a part of it, which is a true
Okay.
blessing.
He is worth waiting for. Oh,
I
good.
agree. Yeah.
I was just received into the Russian Orthodox Church on December 4th last year. So
Very cool.
it's only been a few months for me.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I regret about converting to Russian Orthodoxy is that I didn't do it sooner. So I
Yeah.
wish I would have done it 20 years ago. Nah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. For me personally, I thought that. And I remember telling someone when I discovered it, like, where has this been? Why did no one tell me about this? And then I thought, you know what? Maybe I wasn't ready for it back then. So who knows?
Possibly true. That so I noticed you because of the guests you had on your podcast. Like you mentioned Father Turbo, who I love, and then David Patrick Harry, who I know. He's like one of the smartest guys out there.
He's sharp.
And then I noticed you've got, like, well, I don't have all the full sleeves, but you got tattoos.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got to ask you right away. Has your opinion of tattoos changed over the years? I mean, mine has. I got mine in my early 20s. So
Hmm.
I was just curious.
Only to the extent that they hurt a lot more now, and I'm tighter with money. So in that regard, I probably won't get any more. I mean, the last time I got one was a few years ago, and I thought
Okay.
that first stick as they start, it's like, why am I doing this again? So in that
Exactly.
regard, no. But I probably would never get anything else that wasn't related somehow to Orthodoxy. For instance, there's a friend of mine, an online friend who's an iconographer and a tattoo artist, still
Oh,
Orthodox.
Shane
Shane, yeah.
Swenson.
He said he might have a guest spot down in Austin at a shop. If he does get that, I'll probably get something from him, something small.
Okay. Something Orthodox.
Yeah, for sure.
That ran through my head too, but yeah, I don't know. No, my opinion on tattoos has changed a little bit. People ask me because they see that I have them, and I say, well, if I had to do it again, I probably wouldn't get them.
Mm,
But
I-
but I'm not against people getting them. Like
right.
yeah, I would never shame anybody that got them, but you do get tired of looking at them. I have to say, and I think they tend to be a snapshot into that time in your life.
They do. Yeah. But some of mine scars, not the literal scars, but more metaphorically scars of your past. I kind of like being reminded of some of them.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
so it tells me where I was, and then you realize where you've come from and where you're at now, and they can be very different places, but there's always some similar underpinnings to both, I think.
Yeah, like I have the over here, I have a big Knight of Cups, and that's from the tarot. And when I got it, I was very into the tarot, and I'm looking at that and I
Oh,
go, boy, that was stupid.
okay. Right. Mine are more of like a journey through rebellion, music, women, and right-wing politics, it seems like. So
Any ladies' names or pictures that
a lot of yeah, I mean, I've got ladies' pictures. You can't, yeah, but everywhere. That's probably the main theme, and each one of them kind of represents a different female in my life at some point. So yeah.
and your girlfriend don't bother her
The girl, well,
that you have old girlfriends.
nah. And yeah, I was married as well, and it
Oh,
didn't seem
okay.
to, it didn't bother her either. So
Oh, okay. Cool.
yeah.
Now, getting to the point of why I asked you to be on my show and I want to talk to you. What I'm always interested, especially in guys, because it seems like a lot of men right now are being drawn to Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
So when I saw you, I thought, well, this guy's got tattoos. He's got a story. So
Yeah.
what? How were you raised? Were you raised in any sort of religion or faith, or when you were a kid? I'm curious.
Yeah, so my real parents were married till I was about 9, and we grew up in Houston, Texas. My brother and I did with them. We went to uh, just Baptist type churches around then. It's the Bible Belt, as you know, Texas. And so my priest now calls it like Bapticostal, just kind of a blending of certain
Oh,
evangelical denominations. So, but it wasn't like a strong um remembrance of like, oh, my Baptist upbringing. It didn't really feel like that. And then my parents got divorced,
oh,
and at
sorry.
some point in my, well, miraculously, they're remarried to each other now. Um, they were divorced and married other people for like 12 years, and then got back together. Now they're married again. So that's beautiful. And they're
Cool.
very, very, very devout evangelical Protestants. Like my dad hosts a Bible study every Wednesday at his house, which he's done for the last 15 years at least. So they're devout in that sense. And so, but when they were apart, my stepdad, my mom, and myself and my brother went to a mega church in San Antonio with
Mm.
Pastor John Hagee. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's quite well known in that world. He's actually he was close. This ought to tell you kind of where his perspective lies. He was very close with John McCain when McCain ran in 2008, and McCain actually got some flack in the media, like he's friends with John Hagee, kind of thing. So I grew up teenage years going to that big church, and he's a Zionist, big times, leads with that quite often. And then when I moved to Austin in my 20s, as you might assume, Austin has a lot of uh, vices and temptations, and I got a good career, and I'm a musician, so I was in the music scene.
Wow.
And so the thin veneer of the Christian years with at Pastor Hagee's church kind of drifted out quickly. And I was a actual staunch atheist for many
Wow.
years, and a libertarian politically. So,
Wow.
and I was partying for a long time.
Sounds familiar. So Austin is kind of the San Francisco of Texas, you know?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It's referred to that as a lot.
Okay. Well, I'm wondering, why did you become an atheist? Did you just, like a lot of young people, just kind of get maybe fed up or lazy about whatever religious upbringing they had, and they just, drift away? Or is it like something actually, like, theoretically, that you thought about and you
It's
kind of keep,
it started the first way you said, and I got very big into libertarian politics. In fact, that's how my podcast started. And
wow.
within that, I always have had a thirst and an interest to read and gain knowledge through books and whatnot. So through my discovery of libertarian philosophy, and I start reading all these thinkers, and then the economic side of it, I also somehow started getting into atheist authors like Hitchens. I have the God Delusion book, and this is so cringe. I started following Sam Harris. This was years ago, but we live and learn. And Bill Maher, I always found him entertaining, and so I started hearing his stuff on atheism. And then Penn Jillette, who was in the libertarian world, also staunch atheist. So I actually got into the I guess, if you want to call it, I would call it the theology of atheism, but the philosophy of it or something like that. So I kind of led with it when I would have certain discussions with people.
Wow. So you got deeper into it than just saying, "Oh, I don't really believe in
Right.
God." Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And a lot of libertarians are into weed. So were you a, a marijuana guy?
No, because of my job, we get randomly tested, so I can't.
Seriously?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. So what was that tough being a, because libertarians, it seems like that's a big part of their
It is a big part. It never, I had smoked weed when I was younger, and it never did much for me. In
Okay.
fact, I remember the last time or two that I tried it very young, it made me very nauseous, and I couldn't stop puking. So I didn't miss it by any means. And I was actually, and maybe still am, I'd have to revisit this thought, against the drug testing procedure in my job, because I
Mhm.
thought no one's coming to work. Just for your listeners, if they don't know, and I can't tell you what city I work for, I'll preface it with that, but I'm a firefighter. I'm a lieutenant in the fire department. And so I
Cool.
thought, no one's coming to work stoned. Why are we doing this? This is a waste of money, et cetera, et cetera. And why are you regulating what people do in these days off? I wouldn't care if someone got stoned. But anyway, but it's just not a thing for me. But yeah, the libertarians, especially the ones in Austin, I mean, that they love that stuff.
Now, no, at what point, or did you come to a point, or was it more gradual? Because it seems like some people have conversions that are like Paul, which that's like me. It was quick. And then, or you have like ones like I always think of like Saint Augustine, where it was like years where he was struggling. Did how was your sort of conversion? Was it Paul or Augustine?
It was more Augustine. And it's funny. I think someone told me a quote. I think it was just yesterday. I think it was from Augustine, something like, Lord, please make me chaste, but not yet. Something like that. Um,
Yeah.
and mine was more gradual through the libertarian political circles I was in. They were started to become much more of the right wing
Hmm.
style of libertarianism. So I don't know if your listeners might be familiar with the Mises Institutes in Auburn, Alabama. I was very close with those in that milieu, those circles. And while it wasn't very overtly religious by any means,
Hmm.
some of them were Catholics, and they were always at least friendly to religion and Christianity. So some of those connections I had there would say things like, when you lead with atheism, you're it's putting you into a camp you might not want to be put in, and you should at least be open to Christian ideas. And then when 2020 hit, it's like we saw the madness all around, and a friend of mine said, think if things really go wrong, who's fighting against this tyranny right now? Would you rather live amongst Christians or secular people? I was
Yeah.
like, I think Christians.
Yeah.
And
I
so
believe.
my mind was starting to be at least opened, and I stopped calling myself atheist. Also, I started thinking that sounds like a theology, and the way these people acted, it's almost its own weird religion, and it has its own idols. And so I got away from that term, and then I started saying agnostic, because it sounded too prideful to say I know there's no God, because it's like I would think about it, it's like, well, I don't know that, so I'm kind of leading with a lie. So I would at least say I was agnostic, up until I wasn't.
Now, so you're talking 2020, just right before COVID. So you're fairly new to I mean, to your conversion is fairly new.
Yeah, I first went to my parish that I go to now. It was October 2021.
Okay. I want to get to that too. No, no. So when you started reconsidering Christianity, it seems like a lot of people that I've talked to that I don't know if we would call them reverts, but were raised Christian, fell away like I did. Sometimes they tend to go back to the religion that they were raised in.
Yeah, not me.
Now, now I did as rotten as my experience was. I tried to figure that out. I think people just go back to the familiar sometimes because you know it, and to start something completely new. I mean, that's even more scary. I mean, it's scary to go back to the faith, uh, but then to go to a new faith is even doubly. So why didn't you go back to the religion that you were raised in? Because at least you knew it, you know.
Yeah, and I had again for if there are Protestants listening, this is not a blanket knock on Protestantism, but the version I knew was the Zionist pastor John Hagee,
Okay.
and there was a thinness to it.
Mm.
I just didn't, and I think this was part of it too. I come from the punk rock subculture, and so
Okay.
we've always like that attitude and that subculture has always been kind of pushing back against mainstream things. I mean, my show's called Counter Flow because I've always flowed counter to the stream. And uh, it felt like mega churches, evangelical mega churches, were so plastic, for lack of a better term. And I still felt that even when I was coming, at least opening my mind to the possibility of Christianity, I thought, well, not that kind. And then the music at big churches sounded like, pop. I just didn't like that style. Even
Yeah.
if I could find a message in it that was valuable, the stuff that surrounds the message was not in any way appealing to me. So I knew I couldn't get into that. It's not my style. Some of it feels boomery, but then the younger stuff's almost more cringe where they're trying to appeal to multiculturalism and things that I just thought were cheesy. It's just not my style.
Yeah, I agree. I when I was young, I'm older than you, but when I was young, I was into oi music, and
Okay.
yeah, so I was living in Berkeley in the early '90s. So there was the
Oh, you saw
Gilman,
all the good stuff.
yeah, there was the Gilman Street
Yeah.
Theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw Green Day, Rancid, all those guys.
Operation Ivy, that's all the stuff I grew up listening to.
Uh,
You need to
I
have you had Justin Marler on from Death? Do you know who he is?
no.
He's the one that created this Death to the World.
Oh,
It's an
that's
ortho.
awesome. I have seen that.
Yeah, and he lived in a warehouse. He lived in Gilman Street with Green Day and was doing heroin with them, and then became a
I,
monk.
bu- I
A
might have
monk.
bumped into him at one
You
time.
might have. He was in the band Sleep also at the time, and he became a monk up at St. Herman's of Alaska for 7 years.
Oh, so he's up in Platina.
He went up there,
Oh,
and now, actually I just hung out with him yesterday. Now he's in Waco, Texas, but he's been invaluable for my life that he created Death to the World because that helped pull me into Orthodoxy. And yeah, he was a monk for a long time, and now he's a father and still a very strong Orthodox Christian. Great person.
I would like to talk to him.
Yeah,
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 maybe we knew each other,
yeah.
but yeah. So did no, like when I came back to the faith, I was like literally the prodigal son. So I came home,
Hmm.
mom and dad, and at that time they were very devout Catholic. So it was kind of easy for me to come back to the church. Did you ever go back to your family and say, I'm thinking about being Christian again? And of course they would be like, well, hey, come to church with us.
No, I told
Oh,
them, I said, you're going to think this is crazy because we didn't talk about me being secular or atheist or agnostic, but they sensed that I would not want to go to church. Basically, there was no ever pressure, like, they knew the answer would be no, I think. And once I went to my church, the next day, or maybe even that day, I said, y'all are going to think this is crazy. But at the time I was married and her name was Brittany. And I said, Brittany and I went to an Orthodox church here in Lockhart. And they were like, really? Why? And had all of these questions. Where did this come up come from. And this is, I think, is fun, a fun little thing that happened. My dad contacted a pastor friend of his, and my dad tells me, yeah, I spoke with Pastor Sal, and I texted him that I said, you were going to an Orthodox church, and I just wanted to make sure that that's, it's legit and everything, and that the Orthodox people are good on Christ and the Trinity and God. And sure enough, yeah, he said, yeah, but it checks out. He said, y'all are a little bit into the saints, but it sounds great. And so they could not be happier. They absolutely love that I'm going.
Oh, that's nice. So how? I mean, I'm from San Francisco, and I didn't know much about Orthodox history, specifically Russian. Because I was born and raised Roman Catholic, but San Francisco is like steeped in
Yeah.
Orthodox history. We've had St. John Maximovich here, and
Yes.
Father Seraphim Rose got started here, and
Yep.
so it's there's a lot of history here. But I'm imagining like Texas, like you said, it's the Bible Belt. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what do people know about Orthodoxy? It sounds like maybe your mom and dad didn't know
No,
much.
no.
So how do you wander into an Orthodox church? I mean, how do you do that
Through a series,
in Texas?
through a series of what I would have then called coincidences, but we know that they're not, of course, now. But and of all places, I can't emphasize this enough. This town that I'm in is a country Texas barbecue town. There's a lot of churches. There's about 13 or 14,000 people population here.
Oh, small.
And there are a lot of churches, Catholic, a lot of Baptist churches, kind of just non-denominational, almost like no feel to the churches, some of the big buildings like that. And then some old, small Catholic ones. And to find a Russian Orthodox church, not only it's not overtly obvious because it doesn't face the road, it's in an alley. And I mean, we
Now,
can get into how I found it, but it's here of all places. I could not believe that.
no, I want to hear how you found it.
Okay.
I want to hear that.
As I started researching Orthodoxy, I asked a friend of mine who was on my show multiple times. He's also happens to be a spiritual son of Father Turbo, Cyprian. He's the co-host with Father Turbo on the Royal Path. We became friends. Cyprian was on my show many times under his old name, Vin Armani. And he kept mentioning Orthodoxy. And I never dug into it deeply with him. But we were talking about, I don't want to get you in trouble, like 2020, we'll call it the Koof year. And we were talking about that whole phenomenon. And he kept telling me, if you're looking around at what's going on in a materialist view, you're completely missing the point. This whole thing is spiritual. So you need to try to orient yourself in a spiritual manner to figure out what's happening, why it's happening. And so offline, we were done with the interview, and I said, where can I read more about Orthodoxy? Because you talk about it. Another friend of mine, Matt from the King Pill podcast, talks about it. And you guys are such deep thinkers. You are looking at the whole Koof stuff, what's going on, with a much better perspective than a lot of people. And I don't know what it has to do with Orthodoxy, but it seems like it has something to do with it. So where do I read about Orthodoxy? And he said, okay, easy read, thin, almost pamphlet like. Order Father Seraphim Rose, God's Revelation to the Human Heart, and read that.
I love it.
And it was like hooked within the first few pages. I could not believe the amazing things I was reading. And it was like my whole chest was burning as I read it. And I was like, what in the world is this? This is crazy. It was just miraculous, really. And so I read that, and then I got Nihilism, Father Seraphim Rose's, another one of his books. I said, this guy's amazing. I want to read more of his stuff. And then at the same time, a friend of mine says, there's an Orthodox church in Lockhart. I'm like, what? So I found it, and I just started driving by. It was, like I said, it's in the alley, and I have a golf cart. We can cruise around in golf carts in this small town. So I would cruise my golf cart, and I would just stare at the door, and I had a Saint Andrew, and I didn't go in because I thought, like we mentioned earlier, with the way I look, I thought, I don't know their traditions. I don't know if they think I'm going to look like some big tattooed thug or turn me away. It's ROCOR. I didn't know any of these things. What do I do? And so like once every few days I would drive by it and stare at it and then cruise off. And again, I'm reading Seraphim Rose, and then this guy that listens to my show and follows me on Twitter DMs me, and he says, and he had his real name wasn't being used, and he said, "Hey, I guess I'm about to dox myself, but I heard you say that you live in Lockhart on one of your episodes. I would like to invite you to the church I attend on Lockhart, Texas, St. Andrew's Russian Orthodox Church." And I was like, "What?" And he tells me his name. He's like, "I'm doxing myself. Here's my name. Here's what I do for a living." And I said, "Do you live in Lockhart or something? Should we meet up?" And he goes, "No, I live an hour away. And most of the people that go to that church live surrounding areas, but you'll understand why we all go there once you start going." And I was like, this is the weirdest thing. I keep driving by that church and staring at it. So weird that you would invite me to it. And I said, "And I'm reading Father Seraphim Rose." And he's like, "Oh, he's one of my, he's should be a saint to me. He's healed my wife. His icon's on the wall there at the church. Please come see it." And I said, "Okay." And so that's how I said, "What should I wear? I have tattoos. Do I cover up?" And he's like, "No, don't worry about all that. He said, I'll tell you this, wear comfortable shoes because you're standing." Okay.
Yeah.
And so I did. I attended my first liturgy shortly after that. And that was October 2021. And at the time I would have said, what a weird and I did. I was like, these are funny coincidences that Cyprian would tell me about Seraphim Rose. I would find the church out of the blue. And then this guy that follows me on Twitter invites me, and I told Cyprian that, and he's like, "Glory to God, these are not coincidences. That this is him calling you in." And I was like, okay. And at the time, my wife even said, "These aren't coincidences. These are signs. We need to at least go and give this a shot." Okay.
Wow. That means a lot to me that Father Seraphim Rose played a role
Oh, big
in
time.
yeah, I'm glad in your conversion, because he certainly did in mine. So it's impressive that he is still able to reach out, 40 odd years after he died,
Mm-hmm.
that he's still touching people to this day. It's amazing. Well, he's an American born Russian Orthodox saint, like he said.
Yeah.
And I think what makes him so compelling, especially to guys like you and I, is that he was I don't want to put words in your mouth or characterize you, but he was very much a wanderer. He
Yeah.
really was like St. Augustine. He was very restless for so many years. Um, and then he finally rested with Christ in Russian Orthodoxy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's amazing. But how many Russian Orthodox churches are in Texas? I'm assuming not too many.
I think, no, not too many. I think about 13, maybe something like that.
Oh, so there was one in your small town.
Yeah. That part is just wild to me. Yeah.
Now I came from Catholicism, but not as a kid, but as an adult, I had been in traditional Latin Mass Catholicism, which is very conservative and traditional. When I went to Russian Orthodoxy, so the liturgy was somewhat unfamiliar, but because I'd been going to the Latin Mass, there were parts of it that that looked familiar. But for you,
Hmm.
coming from like kind of like that pop music,
Yeah.
big church Protestantism, it must have seemed really odd.
It
So
was about as foreign as you could get. Uh, as we all know now, they started kind of chanting and singing, and I thought, are they gonna sing this whole service? This is weird.
it
And
is.
then the priest, the priest gives his homily, and it was like 8 minutes. And of course, I was used to like 45 minutes, and I was like, well, that was short.
Hmm.
And it was definitely odd to me, but the icons I loved and the incense I loved.
Hmm.
So that part was so cool. And the rest of it that seemed odd, or maybe exotic is a better word, because I don't mean odd in a negative way, just different than what I was used to. I left going, I don't get everything that just happened, but I'm definitely going back.
Hmm. So something in the liturgy, hit a chord with you.
Oh, for sure. Yes. And
Well,
the purity of the censer and the way that like the light came in through this window above the door and the smoke from the incense and the chalice, like the stuff they were saying, everything seemed so beautiful and real. And so while at this, I recognize that I didn't grasp everything, that I at least wanted to try it again and then again and then again.
that's interesting. So it was the aesthetic qualities.
Hmm.
It seems like Protestantism, and forgive me because I don't have any Protestant background, but Protestantism is very focused on the word,
Yes,
and Orthodoxy and and I would put traditional Catholicism in this too. I think it's a more fully developed religion because you have the word, but you also have the aesthetic qualities.
correct. I would say it's a more full experience. Certainly, there's a lot more layers to it. I
Yeah.
would compare it to when you walking, let's see, knee deep into a pool or getting tossed into the deep end. And that's orthodoxy, is getting tossed into the deep end and saying, you better learn to swim. And if you're having troubles, that's on you. And Christ is here to help you, but understand that your troubles and the reason you're trying to dog paddle here is because you're burning off, rather than calories, you're burning off the parts of you that need to be burned off, and you're learning how to swim in the deep end better.
Hmm. Hmm. Did it come to a point where you went to talk to the priest?
Oh, I talked
Because,
to him the very first day.
oh, good for you.
Yeah, he
Okay.
was great. Yeah. They're
I
super welcoming there. Like I talked to the readers, the priest, the guy that invited me, who is now my godfather. I spoke with them all for probably half an hour.
is
It was
is it a
great.
fairly small church?
Yes, it's probably 800 square feet, and
Oh, okay.
if there's 40 of us, which sometimes there is, including there's kids, of
Okay.
course, it feels really crowded.
Okay. So you couldn't lurk. Like
No, no.
when I started going to Orthodox liturgy, I went to the cathedral in San Francisco. I don't know if you've been there. That's where
That's
Saint,
where John's at, right?
yeah.
I have not.
So
I will 100% be going there at some point.
okay, we'll hang out. And
Yes.
then it's fairly big and it's a lot of people. So I just hung out in the back, very back, and just watched. And it took a while for me to, because I have to say, in that environment, it's a little intimidating, because they got the full choir with
Oh, okay.
with the booming voices, and
Yes.
and the priests are a little bit intimidating. But now that I'd met them, they're very kind. But that's nice that you were in a small church, so
Yes.
it's more hometown family. Yeah,
Yeah. And to my own, I mean, this is a negative quality of my personality at the time. I would have rather have lurked, to be honest. But
yeah,
when
it's
it's
easy.
that small, and
You can't.
I'm a bigger person than the average person, I suppose. Um, and I look like this, and everyone's standing. So I thought, oh man, I'm standing right in front of this lady. Now I'm in her way. Uh, can I go hide somewhere? That kind of thing. But there's no hiding. And now, of course, I know everyone, and that wouldn't be. They don't want you to hide. They want you to be up and talking and in people's way.
No, they love newcomers, and it's interesting now that because I was baptized in a smaller church in Santa Rosa, because I liked kind of like the smaller type small town church. The cathedral is beautiful, but it's much bigger, and
Okay.
it's a lot more people. I kind of feel like where I'm at now, it's kind of maybe like yours, except a little bigger. Is it? It's a real family kind of
Okay. Yes.
atmosphere.
It is nice. And I've gone to Father John Whiteford, who I know you've had on.
I love him.
Yeah, he's amazing. So I've been to his parish a few times. He's our area dean for the in Roquefort in Texas. So I've been to his parish a few times, and it's really the perfect size. It's bigger than the one I go to, but it's not giant by any means, and it's still enough to where everyone at the trapeza afterwards, you go to this building next door, and everyone's talking, and the community's very, it's flourishing quite well there. And Father John's just a amazing person, so it's always nice to see him.
I could see where he could draw people. So, so as you got further into Orthodoxy, what did you start? I mean, were there a lot of apparent differences between that and your upbringing in Protestantism?
There's more of that, to be quite honest. There's more of that now to me after I've been studying and living Orthodoxy for what has it been since October 21. So I can't do the math that quickly, but since then, I would say the first many months, for one, my life went and completely turned upside down, and then
Sorry.
the burning off and the learning to repent, even though I'm not doing confession technically yet, but
No.
repenting of certain past behaviors. A lot of things happened that were uncomfortable, but that needed to happen to lead me into a better place where I'm more, it's always a journey. It's not like you're ever like, well, I'm good, but I'm better than I was. And so now that some of the rough edges have been burned away, um, I am studying the actual theology more, as well as still, of course, learning to feel with your heart and lead in that manner. But I am studying the theology more. And some of the things, it's almost frustrating where I'm like, why aren't other people in other denominations, we're not a denomination, so I don't mean to say it that way, but why aren't Protestant people and Catholics, why aren't they talking about this way to salvation and this version of Hades, or Christ descending into Hades and conquering death? Like, no one talks about that. And it's so as I learn about it, it's so beautiful and neat and layered, and there's so much depth to it. But sometimes I get frustrated thinking of, why don't others in other religions or other strains of Christianity understand this part of it? And so I find that fascinating.
Understand or know?
No, they don't know.
Okay.
Like, the concept of theosis is not something that you're going to hear at
No.
any other church in my town. I don't know that for a fact, but I would bet money that you don't. I find that fascinating and kind of
Well,
sad.
you know what I think is that I think people get comfortable in their religion, just like in a relationship.
Yeah.
Even if it's not going well sometimes, and even like in Catholicism, even if it becomes abusive, you tend to stay just because it's familiar.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people don't realize, especially people who are religious, and I'm talking about people that more than just do an hour on Sunday, that it plays a bigger part of your life. And that's tough to uproot yourself
Yeah.
from that. And I mean, and then although it's maybe easier for you because you weren't coming from a religion. I mean, you were an atheist, although you said, yeah, atheism is a religion. But especially when your friends and your family are very like grounded
Yes.
in that particular church or religion, to leave
Yeah.
it and go do something else, that's tough.
Yes. It is. A friend of mine, one of my old captains in the fire department, started listening to my show,
Oh,
and he was a devout Protestant. And I say was in a very nice way, because as he listened to the show, at the weird coincidence of timing in his life, his daughter, who's entering college soon, met an Orthodox guy. And she's like,
wow.
Dad, I want to start going to this Orthodox church. And then he's like, well, my friend Buck has been talking about it on his show. And so he started getting books on it and studying. And I had a face to face with him a few months ago. And he's like, man, I think we're going to switch to Orthodoxy. He's like, this is really hard for me, because I was a devout member of this Protestant church I was going for years, years and years. And he's like, but as I read about it, it's like, dude, this is the truth. And now I can't unsee it. And I wouldn't want to. So I've got to move to this new, version of Christianity. And it's going to be tough. So it was nice to hear him express it in those ways. And the fact that, to your point, yeah, a lot of people wouldn't do that. So it's neat to see someone that kind of, it hits them. It's like, well, once you find the truth, I say about Orthodoxy, there's nowhere else to go. So once you understand what it's all about, you have to go there, and there's no other option from the way I see it, and now the way my friend sees it as well.
I think I'm particularly interested in this too about men coming to Orthodoxy. Is that I think it can be difficult for guys too, especially if they're married and have kids, because then they have to
Mhm.
bring their whole theoretically, they just have to bring their whole family along with them.
Yeah,
So,
that was part of that's part of why my life went flipped upside down. I don't have kids yet, and now I don't have a wife.
I'm sorry. Do you mind me asking?
Not at all. Yeah,
Was it
we're still
because
very
it?
close. We're
Oh,
still
good.
good friends. It was not. It was the divorce has been amicable, but yeah, I mean, it largely has to do with spiritual life.
Really?
Hmm.
Okay. Where did so she did not? Oh, because you implied that you were both going to the Orthodox
Hmm.
Church. So
Hmm.
she didn't convert or doesn't want to.
It was a quick 180 about 6 or 7 months in. It was like, boom, nope.
So she didn't care for it.
It went from that she did care for it to uh, uh, a sudden, not a pumping of the brakes, but a slamming of the brakes,
Oh,
and said,
okay.
I can't do this.
So what? So I don't want to talk about your ex-wife. It's not fair to her, but because she's not here. But what was her religious background?
She had a strong aversion to religion because of some stuff in her upbringing.
Oh, hey, I
It was
get
it
that.
was still evangelical for the most part, but she, her mom kind of moved around during my ex's formative years. So it's like, why are we moving now? Oh, why are we? Oh, now I want to go to this church. Oh, then now church isn't important to me. She's like, well, I thought it was important. So it was kind of the drama of growing up in that regard. And her and I, when we met, we were both like, yeah, we're atheists. That stuff's stupid. Um, so
I'm sympathetic towards that. I get it. So,
oh,
but
same, yeah,
yeah. So yeah, it's tough as a couple if one has a conversion and the other one doesn't, because
yeah,
if you don't have that fundamental, belief in common, that's tough. But you did when you met, so you did
yeah,
have the
yeah. We had the
that's tough.
fundamental atheist thing in common. Yeah.
Gosh, I'm sorry that happened. So.
No. Well, it's been uh, all things, I think it's God's plan for me. So, and she thinks that as well. So a part of
Oh,
that is what makes it so amicable.
oh, so she turned around. She's not an atheist anymore.
She wouldn't say that she's an atheist, and she loves that despite the divorce, she loves what Orthodoxy is doing for me or has
Oh,
transformed me in some kind of way. She
well,
thinks it's very good. And so she still, which is why, we're still friends. It wasn't like, I hate you for this, you're an idiot kind of thing. We're still close. And she just said, I know you so well. If I'm not going to be Orthodox, it's going to be this constant tugging in your mind, your soul, and your heart that you wish you had an Orthodox wife. And as much as I was like, no, no, it'll be fine, then we both kind of came to the realization, like, I think you're right. It will for
hmm.
a long. So
Well, she's open-minded. But
yes.
but hey, you never know. Everybody's journey is different. Everybody
Hmm.
goes at a different pace.
Yep.
So, I mean, here I am. I was 50. How old was I when I baptized? I was 53, and spent most of my life either Catholic or kind of an occultist. And here at 53, I'm converting to Russian Orthodoxy.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's never too late, and everybody's journey takes different detours and turns and twists and
Yeah.
all over the place.
Yep.
Now, now, is there anything that you could say? because you talked a little bit about the liturgy and you talked about Father Seraphim Rose. Was there anything about this is something I'm really interested in too. Was there anything, could you point to like one thing that really cinched it for you about Orthodoxy that made you think, this is the truth for me? I think for me, it was that they like Roman Catholicism, they still had the Blessed Sacrament, they still had Holy Communion, and they believed in the real presence. So that's what cinched it for me. I could never go to like a Protestant church where the the body and blood of Christ was just a symbol,
Hmm.
whereas in
Right.
Orthodoxy they still have that, they've still maintained that respect for Holy Communion. So that's what cinched it for me, that says yes, this is the true church.
Yeah, I would say
But I'm sorry, but you weren't raised with a belief in
right. Right.
the real presence.
But most of the things I get into in my life, music wise, political issues, I always search for the origin of it. So I love old music. I don't like much new music because I started, I'd get into a band from the 90s, and we talked about punk rock earlier. So you get into Rancid or Green Day, or let's say Rancid, and then it's like, oh, before that was Operation Ivy. What were they influenced by? Oh, the Specials and these other guys. What were they influenced by? Oh, Desmond Decker, Prince Buster. Who were they? So I've always gone back to the roots of what I'm getting into. So when I started becoming open to Christianity, and it's like, well, I want to know, let's go further back. This stuff happened in 1500. Let's go back before that. Oh, 1054, what happened? Let's go back before that. And when you get to the book of Acts, and it's like, well, why would I not? I mean, this is the real thing. So nothing else, everything after this was an offshoot or a break apart or a schism. Well, I want the true part. And so that part's extremely appealing to me. And when there's a church, I forgot where it was at. My reader was just talking to me about this, and they've got a throne of sorts or a chair roped off, and the last person to sit in it was St. Paul, and the church is still open. So I was like, what? That is wild. The reliquary in Platina has a piece of the cross. And so when you start thinking about or learning like this aspect of Orthodoxy, it's like, well, this is the thing. This is the real deal. And then there's the string of coincidences that I just cannot get away from, that aren't coincidences. I know that, but I'll still use that secular vernacular. And then the demonic things too. Just yesterday, I went to a monastery for the first time, and I hadn't even thought of this, but some friends previously had said, "Man, when I drive to a monastery, like I feel the demons hit me, and these things start happening." That wasn't even in my mind. I was excited to go, and I'm going, and I'm not one to have anxiety. I rarely do. All of a sudden, I'm just cruising, and boom, it starts anxious stuff's like hitting in my chest, and I wasn't even thinking bad thoughts, and I'm like, what the heck? And I was like, oh, this is that demonic stuff about they know where I'm going, and they're trying to. I almost had to pull over for a second, and it's like, oh, this is them trying to sway me away. So I started mentally saying the Jesus prayer, gone. And it's like those little things. It's like, my God, this is real. It's so crazy, but so cool.
What was that, an Orthodox monastery that you were going to?
Greek Orthodox monastery, yeah,
Okay, how was that? Was that cool?
beautiful. I mean, amazing. Yeah, the Greeks have all the money or something, because this place was immaculate and gorgeous. It was wild.
Now, I know our last few minutes together, I'm curious about a couple of things, because this is one of the things that really attracted me to Orthodoxy, and this is coming from a Catholic background. So I'm curious about yours from a Protestant. Is it the Orthodox, especially Russian Orthodox, the clergy seems so different to me. I mean, number one, they're married. I mean,
Yeah.
the ones in the parishes, the monks are different. They're celibate, and the hierarchy, the bishops,
Yeah.
but the parish priests, they just seem so much more. fundamentally rooted in not only the community but in family,
Yes.
also just in their own, this is going to sound stupid, but almost like in their own being as men,
Hmm.
where Catholicism, it was just always strange. It seems like I couldn't relate that well to the priest, and they couldn't relate in a healthy way to me. So coming from Protestantism, I mean, how is it different in Orthodoxy? I mean, you didn't have a celibate priesthood, but how were the priests different in Orthodoxy than what you had grown up with the pastors in the.
Well, from my experience, again, it was a mega church. So, and oddly enough, the pastor actually lived in my neighborhood when I was a teenager. And even at that, and I knew his kids from school, they're kind of untouchable to an extent. They're or unaccessible
Are they
because
kind of like celebrities, Buck?
yes, yeah, they're more like that. Where my priest, I mean, I've been to his house uncount, so many times.
Oh,
Father Turbo came to Texas. We hung out all day. I met Father Moses in Georgetown at a Rocore church. I went to his house where he's working out and he's lifting weights.
wow.
So everyone's so accessible, and while there's a holy nature to them and a spiritual quality and depth that I not even close to, they're also normal. So that I think it's great. And Father Turbo and I relate very well because he grew up in the oi scene, in the tattoo world, and all
Did.
of that. So we have that subculture in common, and we still talk about that stuff too.
Yeah. So at the Protestant megachurches, if you have like a spiritual um question or problem, who do you go to? Like an elder, or who do you talk to? Who?
I guess I don't even know that, and I think the concept of spiritual father is so important, and they don't have that, of course. And I find it interesting too that again, I don't want to knock Protestantism. This is my personal experience in it. They don't have saints, and it's like
Yeah.
that that would make me question, or it does make me question things like why would you not? Did you think sainthood and men performing miracles and becoming closer to Christ just stopped after the Bible? That wouldn't make any sense.
Hmm. Wow. That what? Yeah. So I do pray that people in in these other Christian sects, Protestantism, Catholicism, evangelical Pentecostal churches, that yeah, hopefully God does reveal the truth to them. But I think like one of the things that I think your story reveals is that best happens just one person at a time. So you met somebody and then they had an effect on you, and then you've met and talked to other people. So you've had an effect on them. And then
Hmm.
hopefully, God willing, those people, and it just keeps going. And I think that's happening in Orthodoxy. I don't think there's a big campaign to spread Orthodoxy, but it's just
No.
happening through word of mouth. It's
Yeah.
just on a very small local level. So I mean that's awesome. So I think, and that can become a big movement. So I'm excited to be in Orthodoxy like right now because
Yes.
there's people like you and all the other people you mentioned. It's an exciting time. It's also sad. I was watching what's going on in Ukraine right now,
Hmm.
but that's also very edifying to me because I'm seeing there's ladies over there too that are standing up, but and you could see them in Kiev praying at the Lavra.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, I just saw these priests, and I don't mean to laugh, but it's so ridiculous. Is these priests were like tear gassed out of the church, and I'm watching that, and I'm like, wow, I feel really sorry for them, awful. But for me, that's like, wow, that gives me a lot of strength and courage because
Hmm.
look at look at how they're standing up. Look at what they're doing. And you always hear about stuff like that, back in World War One, two,
Hmm.
but it's happening right now. So
Yeah.
it's a great time to be Orthodox.
Yeah, I agree. And those people, it's sad those monks up there have been given the blessing to become martyrs, and it's heartbreaking. But yeah, we'll see. It makes me upset when I see those visuals.
Yeah, I don't want to see any of them die, but they are, and I think that I don't see anything like that in the Catholic Church, but I see right now in the Catholic Church is priests, putting the rainbow flag over the altar, having gay pride masses,
Right.
worrying about transgender this, non-binary this. You
Yeah.
know, they're talking about all of these things that aren't that aren't that crucial. And but then you've got these priests in the Ukraine who are fighting for their lives. So
Right.
it's like, who am I going to look up to
Yes.
as a man and as a
Beautifully
Christian?
put. Right.
Those guys.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. That's a perfect way to put that.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Buck, for spending an hour with me. That was really kind
Oh
of
man, it's
you.
been awesome. Yeah, yeah. Well, now I got to get you on mine.
Okay, and I'm glad to get to know you. One last question. All right, before you get baptized, are you gonna get the beard? No beard?
I can't have this. This is I work every third day at the fire department, and we can't have beards.
Oh, you
And
can?
no, because of the air mask that we wear, it breaks the seal. And
Okay.
I just took one day off, which really puts me off technically for like 5 days. And so when I only shave when I go to work, so tomorrow I'm back at it. This will be gone.
Okay. Oh
Yeah,
well. That's
yeah,
you have an excuse then.
yeah. We
It's
my priest teases me about it. Like, when are we
yeah.
going to get you to retire so you can grow a beard? I'm like, a
It
few
seems
years
like
away.
there's a little bit of pressure, I think, when you
Yeah,
start going to Orthodox, it's like, man, everybody's got a beard here.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Although I don't want to get the long hair. That's
Right.
too much
Yeah.
for me to deal with. But thank you. God bless you, Buck,
God bless you.
and I'll be praying for you as you are illumined, come into the church.
Yes. Thank you so much, Joseph.
Thank you, Buck.
All right.